The first thing my father saw when I walked through his front door was the blood on my sleeve. Not the flag stitched over my heart, not the bruises climbing up my neck, not the fact that I had not slept in almost 48 hours after pulling civilians out of a collapsing extraction zone halfway across the world. He looked at my uniform the way someone looks at a stain on white carpet. And then, in front of 30 guests holding crystal wine glasses beneath the warm glow of his birthday chandelier, my father said the words that finally broke something inside me. "Look at yourself, Evelyn. You're an embarrassment." The room went silent so fast I could hear the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I remember the smell first: rosemary roast beef, expensive cigars drifting in from the patio, my sister's vanilla perfume, and underneath all of it still clinging to me no matter how hard I scrubbed my hands in the gas station bathroom an hour earlier, the sharp metallic scent of helicopter smoke and dried blood. Nobody at that party knew where I had been. Nobody knew that 20 hours earlier I was kneeling in desert sand, trying to stop a 19-year-old medic from bleeding out through both lungs while bullets cracked over our heads. Nobody knew I had carried a little girl through fire. Nobody knew I could still hear her screaming every time I blinked. But my father looked at me standing there in that doorway, and all he saw was shame. I should have turned around and left. God knows I wanted to. But after everything that happened overseas, after 48 straight hours of adrenaline and death and fear, some stupid little part of me still wanted what I had wanted since I was 12 years old. I wanted my father to look at me like I mattered. Rainwater dripped from the edge of my coat onto the polished hardwood floor. My overnight bag hung from my shoulder so heavily it felt filled with concrete instead of clothes. My left arm throbbed beneath the temporary field dressing hidden under my sleeve, and exhaustion sat behind my eyes like hot iron. The party had already started by the time I arrived at my father's house in Alexandria, Virginia, his 71st birthday. My sister Amanda had texted me 3 times that morning, reminding me not to miss it for once. I almost didn't come. Our transport landed at Andrews less than 2 hours earlier. I could have gone straight back to Fort Belvoir, showered, slept for a week, ignored the family disappointment waiting for me across the Potomac. Instead, I drove through pouring rain because some part of me still believed maybe tonight would be different. Maybe age had softened him. Maybe surviving another mission had made me sentimental. Or maybe I was just tired enough to forget who my father really was. Charles Carter stood beside the dining room table in a navy blazer with a silver pocket square, a crystal tumbler balanced in one hand. Even at 71, he carried himself like the CEO he used to be. Perfect posture, perfect hair, perfect smile for everyone except me. His eyes traveled slowly over my dirt-streaked combat uniform. "You couldn't even bother changing first?" he asked. A few guests shifted awkwardly. I swallowed hard. I came straight from base. "Clearly." Amanda rushed toward me before the silence got worse. "Evie, hey." Her smile trembled as she hugged me carefully. "You made it." "Barely," I said softly. She pulled back and lowered her voice. "Dad's been drinking." "That's not new." Across the room, my older brother Daniel pretended to study his bourbon instead of looking at me. That was Daniel's specialty, avoiding discomfort. He wore a charcoal suit worth more than my monthly mortgage payment, and had the polished confidence of a corporate attorney who had never failed at anything in his life. My father lifted his glass toward me slightly. "You look like you slept in a ditch." A few nervous laughs flickered around the room. I felt heat creep into my face. "I've been working," I said. Doing what exactly one of his golf buddies asked casually. "Still doing all that tactical stuff." "Still doing all that tactical stuff." Like I spent my weekends volunteering at a paintball field. I forced a polite smile. Something like that. My father exhaled sharply through his nose. "Honestly, Evelyn, you're 40 years old. Most women your age have families, stability, a normal life." I stared at him. Under the table, my fingers curled against my palm so tightly my nails cut skin. Normal life? I thought about Marcus dying in the sand 2 nights earlier. I thought about the little boy who clung to my vest crying for his mother while smoke rolled through the compound. I thought about the terrified aid workers we dragged onto the helicopter while mortar fire shook the ground beneath us. Normal life. "Dad," Amanda whispered carefully, "maybe let her sit down first." "No, no," he waved a dismissive hand. "I'm serious. Look at her. covered in filth at a family event. His eyes narrowed slightly. And is that blood? The room froze again. I glanced down instinctively at the dark stain near my cuff. It's not mine, I said quietly. God, I should never have said that. Several people visibly stiffened. One woman set her wineglass down too fast. My father looked disgusted. Jesus Christ. It's handled. You walk into my house looking like this and expect people not to react. Something inside me started shutting down emotionally the same way it always had around him. A cold compartmentalization I learned as a child. Don't react. Don't give him the satisfaction. Stay composed. Funny thing was that training probably made me a better officer. I wasn't trying to make a scene, I said. Well, you succeeded. I looked around the room. Nobody met my eyes except Amanda. Even Daniel stayed silent. That hurt more than I expected. My father took another sip of bourbon. You know what your problem is, Evelyn. You mistake recklessness for purpose. My jaw tightened. You disappear for months, come back looking half dead, and somehow expect admiration for it. Admiration. I almost laughed. I had not slept in 2 days. My shoulder burned where shrapnel tore through muscle. My head still rang from helicopter rotors and gunfire, and somehow standing in my father's dining room hurt worse than any of it. Because enemy fire never pretended to love you first. I didn't ask for admiration, I said softly. No, he replied coldly, but you clearly want attention. That one landed. Not because it was true. Because a part of me had spent my entire life terrified it might be. Silence spread across the room again. Rain hammered softly against the windows. Somewhere in the kitchen, ice clinked in a glass. Then my father sighed dramatically and straightened his jacket. At least go clean yourself up before dinner. You're upsetting people. Upsetting people. I nodded once. Not because I agreed. Because I suddenly realized I was too tired to fight him anymore. I turned toward the hallway. And that was when my phone vibrated inside my pocket. One vibration. Then another. Restricted number. I almost ignored it. Almost. But something in my gut tightened immediately. I stepped away from the dining room noise and answered quietly, Major Carter. The voice on the other end was calm official, unmistakably Washington. Major Evelyn Carter, this is General Raymond Holloway. The Joint Chiefs need you in D.C. immediately. I stopped breathing for a second. Behind me, I could still hear glasses clinking in my father's dining room. Still hear low conversations. Still hear the humiliation hanging in the air like smoke. Then General Holloway spoke again. And Major. Yes, sir. What your team accomplished over there? The entire country's about to hear about it. I stood alone in my father's upstairs hallway for nearly 10 seconds after the call ended, staring at the rain sliding down the dark window beside me. The house sounded distant now. Muffled laughter downstairs. Silverware clinking against china. Amanda trying too hard to keep conversation alive after the damage had already been done. My hand still gripped the phone tightly enough to ache. The Joint Chiefs. Even after 16 years in uniform, those words still carried weight that settled deep in your chest. Not fear exactly. Something heavier. Responsibility. I slowly slipped the phone back into my pocket and leaned my head against the wall for one brief second. The exhaustion hit me all at once then. Not dramatic, not cinematic. Just a deep physical collapse hiding beneath discipline and adrenaline. My body was done. But soldiers learn how to keep moving long after the body starts begging to stop. That was the problem with military training. Eventually, you stop listening to pain altogether. Downstairs, my father's voice floated upward through the stairwell. Daniel, tell them about the merger. Of course. Daniel always had stories my father loved. Big clients, bigger salaries, New York partners who respected him, conversations full of polished success that sounded impressive over bourbon. I closed my eyes briefly. When we were kids, Daniel once broke his arm falling from a tree in our backyard. I had been the one who climbed up after him because he was too scared to come down alone. I still remembered carrying half his weight across the lawn while he cried into my shoulder. Dad told that story for years, but never as proof I was brave. Only as proof Daniel had survived. That was our family in a sentence. I pushed myself off the wall and walked toward the guest bathroom. The woman staring back at me in the mirror looked older than 40. There was soot along my jawline I had missed earlier, a cut near my hairline, purple exhaustion beneath my eyes. My brown hair had escaped its regulation bun hours ago and now hung in damp strands around my face. For a second I saw my mother instead of myself. Same eyes. Same stubborn mouth. She used to stand behind me in this very bathroom before school dances, pinning curls into my hair, while Dad complained downstairs that I took too long getting ready. "You don't have to shrink yourself to make other people comfortable," she once whispered to me while adjusting my necklace in the mirror. I think about that sentence more now that she's gone, especially around my father. I carefully rolled my sleeve higher and peeled back the temporary dressing on my shoulder. The wound looked ugly, but manageable. Purple bruising spread across my collarbone where the impact had thrown me sideways against the helicopter frame. The medic at Andrews told me I needed stitches properly redone within 12 hours. I hadn't even noticed the pain during the party downstairs. Funny how emotional wounds can silence physical ones. I cleaned the dried blood from my arm as best I could using a wet cloth. Pink water spiraled slowly down the sink drain. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Amanda leaned quietly against the bathroom door frame. "You okay?" I almost said yes automatically. Military reflex. Instead, I gave a small shrug. He shouldn't have said that. "No," I replied softly, "he shouldn't have." Amanda folded her arms tightly. At 42, she still carried that same nervous energy she had as a teenager trying to keep peace in the house after our parents fought. "He's worried about you," she said carefully. I actually laughed at that. A tired, humorless sound. "No, he's embarrassed by me." "That's not true." "Amanda." I turned toward her. He looked at me